Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Jacob, and this is the Compuling Podcast. This episode is for the 23rd of November, 2020, and today I am joined once again by my good friend Troy.
Hello.
All right. So, last week we did change up the format just a bit. We are going to talk about some news stories that have to do with technology and security, and then we'll move into our discussion topic. And so, yeah, let's just hop right into the news stories. So,
Hop it right in.
Yeah, let's go. I've been running a YouTube channel since about 2015. I think it was October of 2015 when I started. And if you've also been running a YouTube channel, then you'll probably know that one of the first major hurdles to get over as like a small YouTube creator is, getting that 4,000 minutes, I think it is, of watch time in a year, and then 1,000 subscribers. And then you can join the YouTube Partner Program and start making money from YouTube showing ads on your videos. But before you reach that mark, YouTube just won't show ads on your videos and you won't make any money off of it. So it's just kind of like YouTube's not making money and you're not making money. But recently, just this past week, YouTube announced that they are going to be changing that policy. So they'll be actually showing ads on videos owned by creators who aren't part of the partner program, meaning that the creator will not be receiving money from those ads, but the ads will still be shown on the videos, which is a change from how it worked before. So what do you think about this, Troy? I'm actually really genuinely interested to hear your thoughts, because my opinion is like kind of different from what I've been hearing a lot of other people say. So,
well, for me, for starters, it's important to remember that at the base level, YouTube is an advertising company. Right. I feel like a lot of people don't actually recognize this for what it is, but like YouTube is an advertising company. Any TV channel that you've watched or any video service, more or less, that you've used is primarily an advertising company, right? Google is an advertising company, right? More or less, because their primary source of revenue is not from subscription fees. It's not from selling products. It's from selling advertisements, right? YouTube videos are just there to get you on the platform so that you end up seeing the advertisements. And so this is just bringing to light that these ads are in fact YouTube's priority. And I think some casual users of YouTube might be like, what? This is so dumb. Why would they do this? This is stupid. They're doing it because it's their company structure, right? It's how they make money.
Right. Yeah. I just looked up, I found an article from Forbes from just under a year ago, December 24th of 2019. This Forbes article says that Google's advertising revenue will contribute 83.3% of Alphabet, Google's parent company, total revenue for 2019. So assuming those numbers stay, relatively consistent, yeah, Google is absolutely primarily an advertising company.
Exactly. And I would say Google relies less on advertising than YouTube does for profit. That's just a guess. I don't know that.
Yeah, I don't know how YouTube breaks down as far as revenue. But at least a couple of years ago, it was true that Google actually runs YouTube at a loss, meaning that maybe this is a case of them just trying to cut that loss a little bit.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I also did find this graphic. I can send this to you real quick. I found this graphic of YouTube channels and like their respective size, and well over half of YouTube channels are, as of about 2020. Okay, so this is a pretty recent graph. Well over half of these YouTube channels are between 10 and 100 subscribers. So, depending on how many videos those channels have, like that could be a lot of videos with really low audiences that YouTube just isn't making money off of.
Exactly.
So they
And
might be
so
just trying to
my
cut their losses there.
my main concern is not the fact that they're putting ads on smaller channels, right? To me, they have every right to do that because it's their platform, right? There's no subscription fees even to use YouTube, right? It's a miracle that it's been this long and they haven't done this, right?
Well, I mean, we do have the YouTube Red or whatever it's called
Well,
subscription.
yeah, but I mean, who uses that? But
True,
anyway,
true.
my main concern is if these channels will have control over what kinds of advertisements will be shown on their videos, right? If there's a kid-friendly channel, right, or a channel that is maybe not like labeled as kid-friendly, because putting the kid-friendly label on you really like limits your channel a lot.
It does.
So a lot of channels probably don't do that, but are still intended to be for, like not about violence or politics or whatever, right? But if
Minecraft
they,
Let's Plays.
yeah, but if they have no say in what kind of advertisements are shown on your channel, then that for me gets into a bit of a gray area of this is concerning, right? Because these creators are trying to build, in essence, like their own sub platform inside of YouTube, right? Like the creators still have certain rights, and if there's advertisements that are starkly contrasting the type of content they want to provide, that's an issue.
Yeah. That's actually a really interesting point you bring up about like control over what type of advertisements. I don't know if you're familiar with, well, it's a term that's been thrown around a bunch of the past couple years. The adpocalypse. There's been a few of them, where it's actually kind of the other way around, where it's not that the channel creators are picking and choosing what ads are shown on their videos. Rather, it's people will get mad at advertisers for choosing to advertise on a specific type of video, or maybe not necessarily choosing specifically, but their ad ending up on that particular type of video. So, with that, we have two conflicting concerns, right? Where the creators, they want to be able to choose maybe what ads are on their videos, and the advertisers also want to be able to choose what videos they show their ads on, and YouTube is just kind of getting hate from both sides.
Yeah, well, to me, those are two separate issues, because the one of advertisers choosing what videos their ads show up on, that only affects those creators that are getting paid for ads, right? Whereas this move by YouTube is affecting those that don't. Those that don't, I don't think care at that point whether an advertiser chooses to advertise on their videos or not. But I think they would start caring about what kinds of advertisements there are. And I guess I don't know how the algorithm works or anything. I haven't been quite that into the bowels of YouTube yet. But it is something that if I was a starting creator, might be concerned about if I'm going for a certain audience or like content field.
Yeah, that makes sense. But I guess when it really comes down to it, I'm not convinced this is actually as big of a change as people are making it out to be.
Oh, not
because like you said before, YouTube, it's their website. They get to when it comes down to it, right? It's all up to YouTube. And it's still the same limit. Like, it's still 4,000 minutes. It's still 1,000 subscribers, right? They're not changing that barrier, and they're not making it any more difficult, so far as I can tell. So it really doesn't affect those smaller creators quite as much as I think some people are making it out to be. I don't know. Maybe I'm being insensitive.
I think that's kind of the way I see it too.
Okay. Well, that sounds like a good place to move on from that story and on to the next one, where we had Mozilla Firefox introducing this new HTTPS only mode in Firefox version 83. And I actually just got this update earlier today. So I've been testing out this HTTPS mode, and I will be happy to announce that I haven't noticed it at all, which is a good sign, actually, because as they mentioned in their announcement post for this new feature, most of the web that you visit on a regular basis is already using HTTPS. And a lot of hosts, like I've worked with some websites that are on these smaller hosts that a few years ago were HTTP only unless you purchase an SSL certificate. Now they're just adding SSL certificates for free, usually, from Let's Encrypt or something like that.
Yeah, so when I read this article, I thought they didn't already have this. I've used Firefox before, but not prodigiously. And I think, like you said earlier, right? The article says, Firefox even says most of the internet nowadays is HTTPS, right? So if you stop a minute and think about it, this ability of it to start warning you when you're about to go to an HTTP website is less valuable than it was before, right? Mm-hmm. Because there's less HTTP websites, right? Uh-huh. So, in my opinion, it's like kind of too little too late. I mean, it's good that they have it, but this should have happened a long time ago.
Yeah, I totally see where you're coming from. I happen to be a rather religious Firefox user. Not because I'm, that tinfoil hat anti-Google, but I mean, we literally share the show notes for this podcast over Google Docs. So I'm definitely not anti-Google, but by any means. But as far as this HTTPS only feature goes, Firefox did have a couple HTTPS like prefer features before. The two ones that I can think of right now is if you visit an HTTP only site, it'll show like, you have the little security like lock icon in the upper left near your address bar, and it'll show that with a red slash through it. And then the other feature is if Firefox notices that a website has an HTTPS version, it will prefer that version over the HTTP version. It's just now it will explicitly warn you and say, like, it shows a full page screen. It says, this is an unsecure site, this HTTP only site. Are you sure you want to go here? So,
yeah, which, I mean, like I said before, it's good, but in my opinion, it's not that hard of a thing to implement, right? It's really not. And it makes me wonder why they didn't do it before. And I guess, I guess for me, the connotation is that overall, people who are more, I guess I'll say like computer literate use Firefox, right? And so like, overall, the audience of Firefox would be more aware of these kinds of things, but I still don't think that's like a reason per se.
Okay, well, sounds good. I understand where you're coming from, and it sounds good to me. So our third and final story for today is one from the BBC. As always, links to all these stories are in the show notes or the description if you're watching this on YouTube. And this is about how smart doorbells are vulnerable to hackers, or some of these like top selling smart doorbells on Amazon were vulnerable to hackers. And one of these brands was actually caught sending unencrypted passwords to China. And right before the show started, you had a really interesting comment about this story. What was that?
Oh my gosh. Oh yes. There's a whole big old section in this article titled "Convenience versus Security," which is just the most classic question in computer security ever, because people want things to be extremely convenient and work super well, but as soon as their information gets somewhere where it's not supposed to be, they complain, right? And it's a scale, and you have one slider, and you can only be at one position on that scale, right?
Unfortunately, people tend to prefer convenience until security is compromised.
Yep.
Instead of prioritizing security and then building up convenience as much as possible,
yeah,
while maintaining the same level of security.
Although, to be fair, a doorbell sending passwords to China is not like, not enough.
That sounds
security.
Kind of intentional.
Yeah, it's a bit sketchy. But I mean, So I'm guessing it's probably like they recommend here make sure you're buying from a trusted brand, which totally, right? You should always be doing your research, especially when you're buying an Internet of Things item,
Yeah.
right? An Internet of Things
I have
item which can connect to the internet and usually other things on your home network. Because one thing this article
yeah.
mentions is that some of the doorbells let hackers into other parts of your home that are also connected to your network. So it's extremely
Yep.
important to
Something
vet the things that you buy.
mhm. So something that I've always just been kind of skeptical about these IoT devices, you know, the Google Home, the smart doorbells, the what are they always advertising on the other podcasts, like the security sensors and cameras and stuff like that. Ring of security,
Yeah,
that's what it's
yeah.
called. Yeah, those devices, all of these like super internety connected devices, I can just turn on my coffee maker, via the internet. Something, as someone who's deeply involved in technology and programming and has a great deal of interest in security, anytime I hear of more things being connected to the internet, that just kind of makes me cringe inside, because it's more opportunity for vulnerability for just this tiny bit of convenience. Like, so much. Like, you're literally putting the security of your home on the internet
Yeah.
to be
So,
hacked, basically, and
yeah.
it doesn't need to be.
Newsflash, people. The internet is not secure. Let me repeat that. The internet is
The
not secure. When the internet was made, its design goals did not include security. So anything connected to the internet, you cannot count on it being secure.
What are you telling me, that IP doesn't have security just integrated directly into it?
Yeah, there's a reason people still use closed circuit television. It's because it's not connected to
Closed
any
circuit for a
internet
reason.
or network. Yeah, exactly. It means you have to get to the physical hardware in order to compromise it.
Yeah. So my recommendation is stop connecting literally everything in your house to the internet, please.
Yeah, or at least if you're going to do it, use something that is a trusted item that other people have used, that uh, people who know things about technology have used. And also,
Hmm.
this is an important note, because a lot of this is about like the default passwords on these things being
Uh-huh.
extremely weak. Most things that you get, most items like doorbells or especially like Wi-Fi routers, right, will have a default password, and it's usually not that difficult. And there are databases out there that have lists of these common
Hmm.
passwords. So if you want to drastically improve the security of your Internet of Things items, change the default password. Figure out how to do it, Google it, whatever you have to do, but change it to a
Hmm.
good password.
Yeah, that'll actually help a lot. Even just changing the default password too often, that just doesn't get done, and it's astonishing how how few people actually, rather, don't change that default password.
Yeah.
All right, so that's our spiel about security, and so that's it also for our news stories. And now we're going to be moving into the next section of this episode, where we're talking about this question. And that is, how do you go about solving a programming or technology problem when you don't necessarily know where to start? For example, like if you're learning a new technology, learning a new library, new API or programming language, or maybe you're trying to fix a bug in a project that you didn't build, like maybe you just got a new job, or you're working on a project for school, but you're given like a template or something and you didn't write all the code, so you don't necessarily know the details of what's going on. How would you approach one of these problems?
So for me, it kind of depends on what you're talking about. Learning a new technology and trying to fix a bug in a project that I didn't build are two kind of different things. So I'll start with the second one because I probably have a bit more experience in that. For me, if like I'm starting a new job or I'm entering a workspace that I haven't interacted with before, I'm told to implement something, fix something, whatever. let's just stick with fix something for now.
Mm-hmm.
You'll usually, hopefully, you get a location of where this problem is, right? Otherwise, it's a bit difficult to figure out where it is. But assuming you get kind of the general idea of, oh yeah, it is related to this part of the code, right? It's either the build scripts or this class
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. It's a lot of following the rabbit holes, I guess, for me. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it's a delicate balance of following things down the line through files to try and understand what they do without going too deep that it takes up all of your time, right? Because if it's not the
Yeah.
thing that gets to the root of the problem, you still need to understand it because it will probably help you contextualize future code, but you can't go so far as to just be stuck on the same line of code for like a week,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so,
You can't necessarily do a full like depth first search, and you also can't
yeah,
necessarily do the breadth first search. Like you
because you
can't
don't know
just commit to
anything.
one of them because you don't know anything yet.
Yeah, and
So it has
so
to be this balance between like how many levels deeper you're going to go before you move on.
yeah, and obviously, if you have any documentation, that can usually help. However, there usually isn't documentation. Common joke, but it's a real thing, unfortunately. And so, in the case that you don't have documentation, it's a lot about, using debuggers, or honestly, I still use a lot of print statements to help figure
Yep,
out
me too.
the control flow of a program.
Hmm.
They're just useful and pretty easy, right? And I don't need to,
Yep.
set up a debugger if there isn't one, or figure out how to use one that's already there. I know how to do print statements.
Yep.
Debuggers are also very nice, but those tend to be, in my experience, more useful for the actual, like, when you found the bug and you need to figure out exactly what's going on, right? Not
Yep.
super good for
Yep.
pinpointing the bug per se, because it really gets down to the brass tacks of what value does this thing hold? What value does this thing hold?
And also,
Um,
when you get really into the weeds with debuggers, like sometimes learning a debugger is like that's a technology in and of itself,
yep, yeah,
right? Like you can't always just like jump in and say, okay, I'm going to debug this code using this debugger when you've never used the debugger before. Sometimes debuggers are just as complicated as the technology you're trying to debug. So that could be an issue.
yeah. And so,
I am really glad that you brought up documentation before because I think that points to two more ways that you can approach some problem that you just have no experience with before. And one is learning how to read documentation.
huh, yeah,
And that's actually a really important skill to have as a programmer because if you're working in any sort of modern language, so essentially not COBOL, not Fortran, and possibly not C, depending. Um, Technology is changing really quickly. I tend to focus on web development and web technologies, and I don't think I would necessarily be wrong in saying that web technologies are the largest, fastest growing, fastest changing set of technologies in the programming world today. I don't know. Do you want to contest that statement?
I haven't had a whole lot of interaction with web development, but it seems plausible.
Yeah. So, and because of that, like there's a new library coming out every couple of years. That's the new cool kid on the block, right? We had jQuery and we had Bootstrap, and those were kind of the thing maybe like 3 to 5 years ago. And now we have React and Angular, and now Vue is the new kid on the block, and that's just the cool one to be using, right? And so, if you're in web development specifically, these libraries are changing so quickly. You're going to learn a technology and 3 years later it'll be defunct, or you're going to hop on to a new project that's using a new technology. And you really have to like learning how to read documentation is a vital skill. And that can really help when you're approaching a new technology or a project you haven't worked with before, is if there is documentation, that might not be enough. You also have to know how to read the documentation.
So,
And then the
Jacob,
second reason, yes,
how do you read documentation?
how do I read documentation? Well, that sounds like a massive question for possibly a video or a podcast episode all of its own. Oh,
the tease.
The tease.
Gonna
Yeah.
hold it over them.
Yeah. And also, like, second, like, side note, please write documentation for any code that other people are intended to, like, work with.
Please.
So whether that means just commenting it well or writing some sort of half decent readme, please do this.
Please. If I work on your code, I want documentation or I might cry. I'm already almost to tears thinking about it.
Oh my goodness, I have definitely worked with some spaghetti code in my day. That is not fun.
So the other thing I wanted to say is probably my top tip for either of these, learning a new technology or trying to fix a bug in a project that you didn't build, right? Because you don't have experience with it, is talk to somebody that has experience with it. Particularly if it's a project that you didn't build, somebody who is part of the building process, right? And this reveals a part of computer science or software engineering that a lot of people, at least the common culture, doesn't think of a lot, which is the social aspect, which is the soft skills, right? The communication skills, because there's a lot of communicating and there's a lot of sharing knowledge. Right. A lot of computer science, because everything is changing so fast, like you said, Jacob, a lot of computer science is learning how to share that knowledge in a concise yet full way. Right. And so if you're up against this, right, do not be afraid to seek out the people that know about it and ask them about it. Because number one, they will probably be so happy that you asked and will help you with it.
Oh, definitely.
So happy, right? Anytime I get to help somebody understand something, it's great. I love it. And secondly, it's going to be, number one, it's going to give you a lot better overview, big picture, than even like reading documentation, right? Because I can read function definitions for a class all day long, but maybe it doesn't tell me what the class is actually useful for, right? Whereas somebody who has used it does know that and will tell me right from the get-go.
Yeah, totally. Definitely asking for help is always a great way to get help. Like, please do not be afraid. There's so much to computer science and there's so much information out there. You can't possibly expect for you to just know what to do right off the bat all the time. Asking for help is not something that you should ever be ashamed of doing. I do it all the time.
Yeah,
you know?
If you are a computer science student at a university somewhere, learning about these languages, and these libraries, and these algorithms, right? Whatever your job you are in, 98% of the time will have nothing to do with anything you learned in school, right? Might be a hot take, but from my experience, most of the like for me, the primary thing out of a computer science education is learning how to think like a programmer. Anything else, right? I mean, learning languages are useful because that's kind of like that base level thing, the syntax, right? The grammar of programming per se, right? But anything else, right? Like algorithms or like things like that, those can be useful, but there's so many fields to computer science. There's so much going on and things are changing so much that the odds of you needing that specific algorithm in whatever job you end up in are so very small. So it's not about knowing things, it's about learning things.
Yeah. Like learning how to think like a programmer, also learning how to think like a computer is also a really important thing that you do learn in college, learning how to think like a computer and solve problems with computers. I think those are kind of major things that you learn in a computer science degree, which is something that I talked about in the last episode if you want to learn about computer science degrees.
Hey. Man, we are really doing all the plugs today.
Yeah, dude, great segues. But is there anything else you wanted to mention about this question that we had for the episode today?
I guess the only other thing I'll mention is know when to stop. It can be easy to just kind of get infuriated with it and keep pounding your head against the wall on something. And sometimes you have to do that, but you have to do that for a little bit, right? If you're pounding your head against it for too long, you're wasting your time. Go ask somebody about it. Try a different angle. Go get a drink, right?
Don't be afraid to break stuff.
Don't be afraid to break stuff. You learn a lot by breaking code.
Oh my goodness, so much. Yeah. Highly recommend breaking code on a regular basis. It's a great experience.
Yeah. So ask for help and know when to stop.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we will wrap up this episode of the CompuLane podcast. I want to say thank you so much to my good friend Troy for joining me once again on this podcast.
My pleasure.
And I guess we will talk at you all again next week. Thanks so much for listening. Goodbye.
See ya.